The cage of nightmares. The cold walls of the alien laboratory felt like they were closing in around Zoralia. Her eyes flickered open, the bright, harsh lights of the lab stinging her vision. Her body was weak, sore from the cruel experiments that had been performed on her. She could feel the lingering pain in her limbs, her skin bruised and scarred from countless needles and instruments of unknown design. Zoralia had lost track of time. Days, weeks, maybe months had passed since the aliens had taken her. The memory of her home, her people, was slowly fading. All that remained was this cold, metal cage and the horrors she was forced to endure. The cage was small, barely enough space for her to sit up. It was made of thick, transparent material, like some kind of unbreakable glass. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape. The walls were too strong, and the aliens who watched her were too powerful. Her once beautiful green skin was now pale, covered in painful, red marks from the tests they ran on her daily. Zorelia's sharp, alien eyes, which once sparkled with the joy of life, were now dull with exhaustion. She could hear the sounds of footsteps outside her cage, the heavy, clanking boots of the alien scientists. They were always watching, always waiting for their next opportunity to hurt her. Another test today, Zoralia whispered to herself, her voice barely a whisper in the silence of the lab. She had tried to make sense of their experiments, but it was impossible. She didn't understand the strange machines they used or the language they spoke. All she knew was that each test left her weaker than before. Every time they cut her or injected her with strange fluids, she could feel a part of her dying. A new, colder voice echoed through the lab. "Prepare her for the procedure. We must know what makes her different." Zorelia's heart sank. She knew what that meant. The aliens were studying her, trying to understand her unique biology. They wanted to take everything from her, her powers, her memories, her very identity. And with every passing day, it seemed like they were getting closer to succeeding. She curled up in the corner of her cage, wrapping her arms around her knees. She tried to keep herself together, to remain strong, but it was becoming harder and harder. Every time she thought she could escape, something would happen. The aliens would change the rules, create new barriers. Her will to fight was slowly slipping away. Suddenly, there was a sound. A soft scraping noise that came from the direction of the door. Zorelia's ears perked up. She could feel her pulse quicken as she realized she wasn't alone anymore. The door to her cage slid open with a hiss, and a tall alien figure stepped inside. The creature was clad in dark, metallic armor, and its face was hidden behind a helmet, making it look even more terrifying than the others. Zorelia's heart raced as it approached her, the familiar smell of chemicals and machinery following it like a cloud. "Zoralia," the alien said in a voice that sent chills down her spine. It was the voice of Dr. Vore, the lead scientist. He was the one who had tortured her the most. He was the one who had designed the experiments. He knelt down in front of her cage, his cold, yellow eyes locked on hers. "You are different from the others. We have studied many species, but none like you. You have abilities we do not understand. Tell us, Zoralia, what makes you special?" Zoralia said nothing. She didn't have the strength to answer. She had tried to talk to them before, to plead for mercy, but they only laughed at her pain. They didn't care about her words. They only wanted her power. Dr. Vore's face twisted into a sneer. He raised a hand, and one of his subordinates stepped forward, carrying a large syringe filled with a glowing blue substance. "This will help us understand you better," Dr. Vore said. The words were cold, cruel. Zoralia recoiled, her body trembling with fear. She had felt this substance before. It burned like fire, poisoning her blood. She had to resist. She couldn't let them take more of her. Before she could react, a strange noise interrupted them. It was a distant sound, like a low hum vibrating through the air. Zoralia froze, her sharp ears twitching. The noise grew louder, and she could feel the walls of the lab tremble. Dr. Vore's expression darkened. "What is that?" he muttered under his breath, turning to look at the door. The other aliens began moving quickly, their weapons drawn, as the noise continued to grow. Zoralia didn't know what was happening, but for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. Could it be? Was someone coming to save her? Her mind raced. It had to be. It had to be someone who could end this nightmare. She pressed herself against the bars of her cage, her heart pounding. This could be her chance. The noise reached a deafening crescendo, and suddenly, the lab door was blasted open, the metal door crumpling like paper under the force. Alien guards rushed into the room, but they were too late. A human soldier stepped through the broken door, his weapon drawn and his eyes fierce with determination. He was tall, with dark hair and a look of grim resolve. He didn't hesitate. With one swift movement, he fired at the aliens, taking them down one by one. Zoralia watched in awe as the human fought with skill and precision. He didn't speak, didn't waste a single motion. The aliens were overwhelmed, retreating back into the lab, trying to escape. The soldier's eyes locked onto Zoralia's cage. He saw her, weak and helpless, but still alive. Without a word, he approached and cut through the bars, freeing her from the cage. Zoralia's heart swelled with disbelief and gratitude. Someone had come for her. "Stay close," the soldier ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We're getting out of here." For the first time in so long, Zoralia allowed herself to believe that escape was possible. The nightmare wasn't over yet, but for the first time she had a reason to hope. The human in the shadows. Sergeant Michael Harris had seen his fair share of battles, but nothing could have prepared him for the hellish nightmare he found himself in now. His head throbbed from the blow that knocked him unconscious during his mission, and when he awoke, he was locked in a cold, damp cell. The walls were covered in alien symbols and strange markings that made no sense to him. His hands were bound, and his weapons had been taken. As he tried to move, he felt the weight of the chains on his wrists, the harsh reality of his situation sinking in. He wasn't just a prisoner of war, he was at the mercy of beings he couldn't even comprehend. Alien creatures, more monstrous than any he had seen, paced outside his cell, their eyes glowing in the dim light. The fear of the unknown gripped him. It wasn't long before he realized he wasn't alone. From the cell next to his, he could hear soft, ragged breaths and faint cries. At first, he thought it might be another human, but the voice didn't sound right. It was too alien. When he pressed his ear to the cold, metallic wall separating them, he could hear the distinct, pained murmurs of someone. No, something, suffering. Zoralia. The name came to him in a flash of realization. He had heard stories of human abductees, of soldiers and civilians taken by alien forces for cruel experiments. But this was different. The voice, fragile yet filled with strength, couldn't be human. It was something else entirely, and she sounded trapped. Michael's heart twisted. The sounds from the other side of the wall were like nothing he had ever heard. Pain, fear, desperation. She was being tortured. He could feel the anger building inside him, but he kept it in check. Panicking wouldn't help. It never did. He listened carefully, trying to make sense of the situation. The footsteps of the alien guards echoed through the corridor, and the labored breathing of the alien girl grew louder. Michael could feel her pain. It was as if her suffering was reaching across the walls to him, calling for help, even though she couldn't know he was there. Then, an idea hit him like a bolt of lightning. If he could somehow free himself, maybe, just maybe, he could help her. The aliens had left him alone for now, but he wasn't sure how much time he had. They wouldn't leave him unguarded for long. He needed to find a way to escape, not just for himself, but for her too. As he lay on the cold, metal floor, his mind raced. His training, his experience, everything he had learned in battle, it was all useless here. But he wasn't going to give up. He had seen soldiers do the impossible before, and now it was his turn. A slight noise caught his attention. Through the narrow window in his cell, he saw a shadow move across the hallway. A human figure, an alien guard, but something was off. It wasn't moving like the others. It was weaker somehow. Michael squinted through the bars, trying to make sense of the figure. It wasn't one of the regular guards. It was smaller, with an oddly familiar shape. And then it hit him. The human soldiers the aliens had captured. They had to be around here somewhere. If he could free one of them, they could help him break out. But who could he trust? The other prisoners? The alien girl? Suddenly, a voice whispered from the darkness, "You're not alone." Michael's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't his imagination. The voice came from the wall between his cell and Zoralia's. It was her. But how could she speak to him? How could she even know he was there? Her voice, though faint, carried a sense of urgency. They're coming soon. The experiments, they'll begin again. Michael's mind raced. He had to act fast, but how? He looked around his cell, searching for anything that might help him escape. There, against the far wall, was a broken piece of metal piping, discarded by the aliens. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. With a grunt of determination, Michael pulled the pipe free, his hands working quickly. He knew time was running out. The aliens would be back, and if he didn't act now, Zoralia, along with everyone else, would suffer even worse than before. The thought of failing her, of leaving her to that awful fate, pushed him forward. The plan was risky, but the only thing that mattered now was getting out, getting free, and saving her. The silent bond. The days in the cold, damp cell felt like years. Michael's body ached from lack of food and water, but his mind was sharp, his focus unwavering. He spent every moment observing the alien guards, trying to find a way out, any weakness in their security. But the more he watched, the more he realized how futile his situation seemed. He was a soldier, trained for combat, not for this kind of cage. Still, his thoughts often strayed to the strange girl in the adjacent cell. Her name had come to him in the whispers through the walls, Zoralia. He could hear her every time the aliens conducted their experiments on her. Her screams, the strange gurgling sounds as if they were draining something from her, and the eerie silence that followed each procedure. There were no words, no sounds of protest anymore, just the softest sobs and the occasional faint gasp for air. Michael hated himself for being helpless. But one night, everything changed. It was late, if time even had meaning in this place, and Michael was half asleep on the cold concrete floor when he heard something different. Zoralia wasn't crying out in pain. Instead, her voice was softer, almost like she was trying to speak to him through the wall. "Help! Me!" Her voice was broken, barely audible, but it sent a shiver down Michael's spine. He had never heard her sound so human. He leaned closer to the wall, his pulse quickening. Was this a chance to connect? To do something? "Zoralia," he whispered, testing the silence. Are you there?" For a long moment, there was nothing but the distant sound of alien machinery humming. Michael almost thought he imagined it. But then her voice came again, faint and full of desperation, yet holding a spark of hope he hadn't heard before. "You hear me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, I hear you," Michael replied, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe he was speaking to her, the mysterious creature who had endured so much pain. "What are they doing to you?" "I don't know, Zoralia paused, as though considering how much to reveal. "They are taking my essence, trying to learn what makes me strong." Michael's mind raced. "We need to get you out of there. Can you stand? Can you walk?" There was a long pause, followed by a faint chuckle that sounded more like a cough than anything else. "I have no strength left, but you have hope. That is something." Her words hung in the air, heavy with both defeat and something else, something that sparked a glimmer of understanding between them. Michael wasn't sure why, but he felt connected to her. This alien girl, this stranger, had suffered unimaginable horrors, and yet she still had hope. She still believed there was a way out, and that hope, he couldn't let it fade. "I don't know how, but I'm going to get you out of here, Zoralia. Just hold on," he said, his voice firm with determination. "I'll find a way." Human, she whispered softly. You are different. You fight for others. I have seen your kind before. They are strong. Michael's heart clenched. The truth in her words was undeniable. He had seen humanity at its worst in this war, but he'd also seen moments of incredible resilience, moments that had inspired him to keep going when everything seemed lost. And now, for the first time, he felt like he was fighting not just for survival, but for someone else's future too. The connection between them, fragile yet powerful, was their only hope in this dark, cruel world. They were both prisoners, trapped by forces they couldn't control, but for the first time, the spark of rebellion lit inside him. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a lifeline. Stay strong, Zoralia, he whispered. I'll get you out, I promise. And in the silence that followed, both of them knew their fight was just beginning. The breakthrough. Zoralia's voice, weak but insistent, pulsed through the cold metal of the wall that separated her from the human. Michael's heart raced, the silence in the cell heavy as he waited for her to speak again. The hope in her words ignited something in him, a spark that he hadn't felt since his capture. He wasn't alone anymore. Someone else was trapped here with him, and though they were separated by alien technology, they were connected in a way that felt real. I can't last much longer, Zoralia whispered, her voice shaking. They will take everything from me. They already have. The raw vulnerability in her words struck Michael deeply. She had been through unspeakable horrors, and yet, despite it all, she was still reaching out to him. He pressed his ear against the cold wall, speaking softly, as if afraid the guards might hear. I won't let them do that. I'll find a way out. I swear it. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a quiet, strained laugh escaped from her. You have no idea what they've done to me, human. What they've taken. Michael felt the weight of her words. It wasn't just her physical body they were tormenting. It was her very essence. Whatever they were doing, it was changing her. But he couldn't dwell on that now. There was a way out. He just had to figure it out. And maybe, just maybe, Zoralia could help him. I've been listening, Michael said, his voice low and determined. I know the layout of this place now. I can get us out, but I need your help. Zoralia didn't respond right away. Michael wondered if she had given up hope, if she'd lost the will to fight. But then her voice, faint but resolute, came through the wall. You can't escape alone, she said. They control everything. The walls, the doors, the systems. But there is one weakness. I know it. I can show you. Michael's pulse quickened. A weakness. Was she telling the truth? Was there something he hadn't seen? He pressed closer to the wall, as if getting closer could somehow bring her closer too. Tell me, he urged. Zoralia paused, the quiet hum of alien machinery filling the space between them. Then she spoke, her words deliberate, calculated. There is a central control room. The heart of the lab. It's where the power is. If we can disable it, we can break free. Michael's mind raced. He had an idea of where this control room might be, but he needed more. How do we disable it? The next words she spoke were fragmented, as if every breath she took cost her energy. They control it with a code, a sequence. I can help you hack it, but it's dangerous. You will need to be quick, or they will know. Michael didn't hesitate. I can do it. I'll find a way to get to that room. And once we're free, they'll regret ever touching you. There was a pause before Zoralia's voice cracked again. I don't know if I can keep fighting. But you can. You must. The gravity of her words settled on him like a weight. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was fighting for her. For the broken alien girl who had endured unimaginable pain and who now trusted him to free her. Don't worry, Michael replied, his voice steady. We're getting out. Together. And for the first time since his capture, he felt the faintest hint of hope stirring inside him. He had a plan, but this time it wasn't just about escape. It was about saving someone who had been lost to the darkness just as much as he had. The unexpected ally. Michael's breath caught in his throat as Zorolia's voice faltered, then steadied with a new, uncharacteristic strength. But there is a way, she continued, each word deliberate, as though drawing from some deep well of remaining courage. I know their systems. I've seen the patterns in the guards' movements, the control they think they have over this place. There's one flaw, a small weakness they never noticed. Michael leaned in closer to the wall, his mind racing. He had known from the start that this place, the alien facility, was far from invincible. But this new revelation gave him hope. What do we need to do? The alien girl was silent for a moment, as if calculating something in her mind. Then, with a quiet yet intense voice, she spoke again. I can access their central network, through my connection to the lab's technology. But I need to be free. The restraints, they're blocking me. Michael's heart skipped a beat. If she could access their systems, they might have a chance to break out. But there was a catch. She had to be freed first. And how could he do that? He was locked in a cell with chains around his wrists, no weapons and no allies. The alien guards, 3 of them, patrolled the hallways at unpredictable intervals. It was impossible to predict when they might be distracted long enough for him to act. But the thought of Zoralia, of her pain and fear, pushed him to think harder. I need to know what you can do. You said they have a flaw. What do you mean? Zorolia's voice was quieter now, almost conspiratorial. The lab was never designed for me. They didn't expect a being like me to survive this long. I can manipulate certain aspects of their technology. Just a little, but enough to cause confusion. I've done it before when they weren't looking. I can trigger an overload in the system, shut down the power to certain rooms, if you can get close to the main console. A cold shiver ran down Michael's spine. He had no idea what this alien girl had endured to gain such abilities, but he knew one thing. She was their best chance. His survival depended on her survival, and he wasn't about to let her down. I can get to the console, he whispered back, a plan forming in his mind. I've been watching the guards. I know where they keep the control room. But how do we get past the rest of the security? There was a long pause before Zoralia answered. I will create a distraction. You will need to move fast. If I can trigger a system glitch, they'll be distracted just long enough for you to slip past them. Michael felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. This was their chance. Tell me what to do. Zorolia's voice came through, stronger now, infused with the kind of determination Michael hadn't heard before. When the guards come, wait for the moment they turn their backs. That's when you make your move. I'll disable their security system for just enough time. You'll need to run, Sergeant. Don't stop. He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Understood. The weight of what he was about to do hung over him. One wrong move, and they'd both be caught, or worse. But the girl, Zoralia, had been through unimaginable suffering, and now she was offering him a way out. Michael had always fought for his comrades, but this was different. This time, he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for someone who needed him just as much as he needed her. A low hum echoed through the facility as the door to the hallway outside their cells creaked open. The guards were making their rounds. This is it, Michael thought, adrenaline surging through his veins. Time to move. The power of distraction. Michael's pulse quickened as Zorolia's plan unfolded in his mind. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. If she could disable the lab's systems, even for a few minutes, it might create enough chaos for them to escape. The guards would be distracted, and the control room would be temporarily shut down. But there were so many variables. Could they really pull it off? How long do we have once you trigger the overload? Michael whispered, his voice tense. Zorolia's reply was a soft murmur, but there was an edge of determination in it. Maybe 10 minutes. No more. After that, they'll know something is wrong. They'll come to check, and when they do, they'll be more cautious. 10 minutes. That was all they had. Michael's mind raced as he assessed the situation. He had to be quick, precise. He couldn't afford a single mistake. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the rising pressure. "I'll create a distraction when the power shuts down. You do what you need to do. Once the doors are open, we run. Fast." Zorolia's voice was filled with quiet confidence. "I trust you, human. You have more courage than I thought." Her words lingered in the air, a fragile thread of hope between them. But Michael couldn't focus on her praise. His mind was consumed with the details, timing, movement, the layout of the facility. The guards' patterns were unpredictable, but he had learned enough to make educated guesses. Then came the moment. The soft hum of machinery, the constant whirring sound that filled the lab with a quiet unease, suddenly shifted. It was almost imperceptible, a faint disruption in the steady rhythm. Zorolia had begun. Michael's heart raced as he heard the first signs of chaos outside. The flickering lights, the sudden shift in the sound of the ventilation system. It was working. The aliens had no idea what was coming. As the lights blinked out, the sudden darkness consumed the corridor. Michael wasted no time. He sprang to his feet, his body aching from the hours of confinement, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He could hear the aliens outside, their confused voices echoing in the darkness. They were aware that something was wrong, but they weren't prepared for it. Michael grabbed a loose pike from the corner of his cell, using it as a makeshift weapon. He positioned himself near the door, listening for the footsteps of the nearest guard. He could hear the sound of someone moving closer, their boots tapping on the hard floor, unaware of the sudden danger. Now. With a sharp motion, Michael yanked the pipe at the door, banging it loudly against the metal. The guard outside froze, his confusion evident. "What's happening?" One of the alien guards growled, but Michael didn't give him a chance to react. He struck again, harder this time. The sound echoed down the hall, and then Michael quickly ducked behind the corner, holding his breath. The guard took the bait. His footsteps grew louder as he rushed towards the sound of the noise. Perfect. With the guard distracted, Michael glanced at Zorolia's cell. He could hear her faint movements from the other side of the wall, and though the darkness made it hard to see, he knew the moment had come. He had to act now. As the power faltered and the dim lights flickered back on, Michael made his move. He lunged at the guard from behind, grabbing him by the shoulder and pulling him into the shadows. The alien struggled, but Michael had the advantage. With a quick twist, he incapacitated him, using the element of surprise to his full advantage. Zorolia's voice suddenly echoed in his ear. "The systems, I've done it. The doors are opening." A sudden heavy hiss echoed from the walls as the locks on their cells began to disengage. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, their chance. But as he rushed to Zorolia's cage, a sharp sound broke through the silence, the unmistakable click of more guards rounding the corner. "They're coming. Go," Michael shouted to Zorolia, pulling open the cage door. "Run, now." Zorolia's eyes, bright, fierce, and filled with a fire that hadn't been there before, met his. She didn't hesitate. With a swift, graceful movement, she was on her feet, her alien form lithe and powerful. The glow in her eyes was like fire, burning with the intensity of someone who had survived a nightmare and was now tasting freedom for the first time. She looked back at him one last time, her voice low and steady. "This is our fight now." Michael nodded, heart racing, as they both bolted down the hall, the sounds of the aliens' pursuit growing louder behind them. But there was no turning back now. The alien girl, had become his ally, and together they would break free. The escape and the price of freedom. The first blast of power failure hit the lab like a shockwave, plunging everything into eerie, flickering darkness. For a split second, Michael felt as though the entire world had paused. The faint hum of alien technology that had haunted him for so long was gone, replaced by an unnatural stillness. Then, just as quickly, the emergency lights blinked on, red and harsh, casting long, menacing shadows down the sterile hallways. He didn't hesitate. With the brief moment of confusion on the guards' faces, Michael leaped into action. His muscles screamed as he moved, every instinct honed by years of training kicking in. The chains on his wrists rattled as he swung them against cell bars, forcing his way toward the control panel. He had no idea how to bypass the lock, but desperation gave him focus. He slammed his foot into the control unit, and by sheer luck, it sparked. An electrical surge ran through the panel, causing the door to unlock with a sharp click. He was free. But there was no time to celebrate. The alien guards were already regaining their bearings, and their voices echoed down the corridor in alarm. They had begun to shout commands, their alien tongues twisting in a way Michael couldn't fully understand, but their intent was clear. They were coming. Zorelia's voice came through the wall, urgent and steady. Go, now. Without hesitation, Michael sprinted through the hallway, taking the left turn he knew would lead to the main corridor. His footsteps echoed in the silence, a reminder of the risk they were taking. He passed through the darkened, strange hallways with their shimmering alien walls, his heart pounding in his chest. But there was something else in the air now, something electric. Zorelia had done it. She had disabled their systems, and the chaos was only growing. Then, as he reached the large metal door at the end of the hall, Michael felt the sudden, gut-wrenching pull of something deeper, a mental presence. It was Zorelia, not just through the walls, but within him. I'm with you, she whispered inside his mind. The door hissed open, and Michael stepped into the chamber beyond. It was a vast, high-tech control room filled with consoles, blinking lights, and alien symbols that made his head spin. The central command station was directly ahead, but the guards had already regrouped, their weapons raised. Time was running out. Zorelia's voice surged again in his mind. The systems, I can't hold them off for long. The door, it's your only chance. Get through. Without thinking, Michael moved. He rushed toward the control panel and slammed his palm against it, willing the door to open. The console sparked, then went dead. The guards were getting closer. And then, like a breath of fresh air in the suffocating dark, the door opened. Now, Zorelia's voice shouted in his mind, full of intensity. The instant the door slid open, Michael bolted. The blaring alarms, the sound of alien soldiers rushing toward him, couldn't stop him now. Zorelia had done what she could, but the price of their freedom was clear. She was starting to fade. The connection between them was weakening, the strain too much for her. But he couldn't stop. Not now. He heard the shouts of the aliens behind him, the sound of weapons being drawn. Michael's legs burned, his body exhausted, but he kept running, pushing forward. He reached the exit. There was no time to look back. The facility was already starting to lock down, alarms blaring and lights flashing as the control systems sputtered back to life. As Michael burst out into the open air, the cold night sky met him. The stars above felt like a promise of something beyond this hell. He could breathe again. He had escaped. But Zorelia, the bond between them was still there, faint but present. In his mind, he could hear her final, soft words as he ran into the distance, her voice carrying the weight of everything they had survived. Thank you, human. You gave me my life and my freedom. With that, the connection snapped. Michael stumbled as the night air slammed into his chest. He looked up, his heart heavy, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself a breath of relief. The fight wasn't over. But for now, they were free.